Most people pray to a God they believe exists somewhere out there, begging for intervention in their problems. Joel Goldsmith discovered this approach keeps you spiritually powerless because you're addressing an external deity who may or may not respond to your requests. The revolutionary truth Goldsmith uncovered will shatter your current religious conditioning. God is not a being separate from you. God is the very consciousness that you are. This isn't blasphemy. It's the mystical reality that transforms everything about how you experience life. When you realize that divine consciousness is your true identity, prayer becomes communion with your own spiritual nature. You stop begging an outside force and start recognizing the infinite power that has always been operating as your very being. This understanding changed Goldsmith from a traditional religious teacher into a mystical healer who could demonstrate instantaneous spiritual healing. The same consciousness breakthrough awaits you right now. Traditional religion taught Goldsmith that God judges, punishes, and rewards based on human behavior. He spent years preaching this conventional approach until a profound spiritual awakening revealed the opposite truth about divine nature and human experience. God doesn't operate in the realm of good and evil, reward and punishment. Divine consciousness simply is, expressing as wholeness, completeness, and perfection. Disease, lack, and suffering exist only in human mental concepts, not in spiritual reality. This revelation came during Goldsmith's deepest spiritual crisis, when traditional prayers failed completely. In that moment of surrender, he experienced God not as external judge, but as the very life force expressing through every cell of his being. From that breakthrough forward, Goldsmith's healing work demonstrated that consciousness creates experience. Change your level of consciousness and your external circumstances transform automatically without human effort or manipulation. Goldsmith discovered that most spiritual seekers unknowingly practice spiritual materialism, using spiritual techniques to get material results from a God they imagine controls external circumstances like a cosmic vending machine. This approach keeps you trapped in limitation because you're still operating from the belief that something outside yourself has power over your experience. You remain spiritually dependent and mentally frustrated when prayers aren't answered according to your timeline. True spiritual practice involves recognizing that consciousness and experience are one unified movement. There is no separation between your awareness and what appears in your life. Everything you experience is consciousness appearing as form, circumstance, and relationship. When you grasp this non-dual reality, manipulation stops and authentic spiritual living begins. You no longer try to change conditions through willpower or positive thinking, but rest in the awareness that consciousness itself is the substance and activity of all experience. The most radical discovery in Goldsmith's teaching is this: there is no human being who needs healing, improvement, or spiritual development. Your true identity is already complete, whole, and perfect, because you are divine consciousness itself appearing as individual expression. Every problem you face exists only in the realm of mental concepts about yourself and your circumstances. When you recognize your true identity as consciousness, these mental images lose their power to create suffering, limitation, and discord in your experience. This doesn't mean ignoring practical responsibilities or denying challenging circumstances. It means recognizing that your essential nature remains untouched by temporary appearances. You begin responding to life from wholeness rather than reacting from imagined lack. Goldsmith proved this understanding through decades of spiritual healing work. When people recognized their true identity as divine consciousness, physical healing, financial abundance, and relationship harmony often followed naturally without human intervention or effort. During World War II, Goldsmith was stationed in the Pacific, where he witnessed the healing power of consciousness recognition firsthand. A fellow soldier approached him with severe dysentery that military doctors couldn't cure through conventional medical treatment. Instead of praying to God for healing, Goldsmith helped the soldier recognize that his true identity as divine consciousness was incapable of disease or disorder. They spent 3 days in silent communion with this spiritual truth about identity and wholeness. On the third day, the soldier experienced complete healing without any medical intervention. The dysentery disappeared entirely because consciousness had been lifted above the mental concepts that were projecting the appearance of physical disorder and limitation. Word spread throughout the military base about this remarkable healing. Over the following weeks, dozens of soldiers sought Goldsmith's help for various ailments. Most experienced significant improvement when they grasped their identity as divine consciousness expressing perfect health. After the war, a wealthy businessman contacted Goldsmith about financial ruin, threatening his family's security and future prosperity. Traditional business solutions had failed completely, and bankruptcy seemed inevitable within weeks of their initial meeting. Goldsmith explained that financial lack exists only in human mental concepts about limitation, scarcity, and separation from infinite abundance. Divine consciousness knows only wholeness, completeness, and unlimited supply, because these qualities define the very nature of spiritual reality. Together, they practiced recognizing consciousness as the substance and activity of all supply. Instead of using mental techniques or positive affirmations, they rested in silent awareness of abundance as consciousness expressing through every aspect of experience. Within 2 months, unexpected opportunities began emerging that resolved the financial crisis completely. New business partnerships formed, old debts were forgiven, and profitable ventures appeared naturally without forced effort or manipulation on the businessman's part. A mother brought her teenage daughter to Goldsmith after medical specialists declared her condition incurable and progressive. The family had exhausted conventional treatments and alternative therapies without any improvement in symptoms or overall health. Rather than focusing on the physical condition, Goldsmith guided them to recognize that divine consciousness expresses only perfection, wholeness, and harmony. Disease and disorder exist solely in human mental concepts about body, health, and physical limitation. The breakthrough came when the daughter experienced a profound recognition of her true identity as perfect spiritual expression. This wasn't positive thinking or mental denial of symptoms, but authentic spiritual realization of consciousness as the substance of her being. Gradual improvement began within weeks of this recognition. Over 6 months, symptoms diminished steadily until medical examination revealed complete restoration of normal function. The healing occurred naturally as consciousness recognition dissolved the mental concepts, creating disease appearance. These transformation stories reveal the practical power of consciousness recognition in everyday human experience. When you stop seeking healing from outside sources and recognize wholeness as your true identity, apparent problems lose their power to create suffering and limitation. Goldsmith's approach differs from positive thinking, visualization, or mental manipulation techniques. You're not trying to change circumstances through mental effort, but recognizing that consciousness and experience are unified spiritual movement, expressing perfect harmony. This understanding requires patience and consistent practice because lifetime conditioning has programmed human thinking to believe in separation, limitation, and external causation. Spiritual awakening is a gradual process of recognition rather than sudden magical transformation. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond recognition of your true identity, Goldsmith taught practical techniques for maintaining consciousness awareness throughout daily activities. The most powerful practice he discovered was what he called spiritual listening, silent receptivity to divine guidance rather than mental planning. Instead of beginning each day with personal goals and mental strategies, spend 15 minutes in complete silence, allowing consciousness to reveal its own perfect activity. This receptive state opens you to guidance that transcends human knowledge and planning. During this listening period, don't attempt to hear voices or receive dramatic revelations. Simply rest in quiet awareness, allowing whatever thoughts, feelings, or insights to arise naturally without judgment or interpretation from your personal mind. This practice gradually establishes a continuous sense of being guided by infinite intelligence rather than struggling through life with limited human perspective. Decisions become clearer, timing improves, and opportunities appear more synchronistically. Another essential technique Goldsmith developed was consciousness treatment for challenging relationships and difficult people. Instead of trying to change other people's behavior or protect yourself from their negativity, You work entirely within your own consciousness recognition. When facing relationship conflict, silently recognize that the other person's true identity is divine consciousness, expressing perfection and harmony. Their troublesome behavior exists only in mental concepts, not in their essential spiritual nature. This practice doesn't make you passive or vulnerable to abuse. Rather than reacting emotionally or defending your personal position, you respond from spiritual understanding that dissolution of conflict comes through consciousness recognition rather than human argument. Many students report that difficult relationships transform naturally when they consistently practice seeing others as consciousness rather than problematic personalities. Harmony emerges without confrontation or manipulation because consciousness recognizes itself as the essence of every individual. For abundance and supply concerns, Goldsmith taught consciousness recognition rather than mental techniques or positive affirmations about money and material possessions. Abundance isn't something you attract or create through spiritual manipulation of external circumstances. Divine consciousness is infinite supply itself, expressing through every aspect of your experience, including finances, resources, opportunities, and material needs. Lack exists only in mental concepts about limitation and separation from this infinite abundance. Practice recognizing consciousness as the substance and activity of all supply in your experience. This means acknowledging abundance not as something you need to acquire, but as the very nature of consciousness expressing through your daily needs and activities. Students often discover that supply appears more naturally when they stop trying to demonstrate abundance and simply rest in recognition of consciousness as unlimited supply. Opportunities, resources, and financial solutions emerge without forced effort or anxiety about material security. The most advanced technique Goldsmith shared was consciousness recognition during physical pain or illness symptoms. Instead of fighting disease or using spiritual techniques to overcome physical problems, you recognize wholeness as the truth about embodied existence. Physical healing occurs naturally when consciousness is recognized as the substance and activity of bodily experience. Disease symptoms exist in mental concepts about body, aging, heredity, and physical vulnerability, not in consciousness expressing as perfect embodiment. This approach requires great patience and spiritual maturity, because human conditioning strongly believes in physical causation and medical necessity. Consciousness healing works gradually, as mental concepts about limitation dissolve through consistent recognition of spiritual wholeness. Many students experience significant health improvements through this practice, though Goldsmith always emphasized that consciousness recognition supplements rather than replaces appropriate medical care when needed for immediate physical safety and comfort. Despite these powerful techniques, most students encounter significant obstacles when applying consciousness recognition to deeply rooted problems and lifelong patterns of limitation, fear, and suffering that resist spiritual understanding and healing approaches. The greatest challenge is mental resistance to accepting your true identity as divine consciousness. Human conditioning insists on personal identity, individual problems, and external causation. Your mind will generate countless arguments against spiritual truth. Another common obstacle is expecting immediate results from consciousness recognition. Spiritual awakening is usually gradual, requiring consistent practice over months or years as lifetime conditioning slowly dissolves through repeated recognition of truth about identity and experience. Many students become discouraged when old patterns resurface after initial breakthrough experiences. This is normal spiritual development, not failure. Each recognition of consciousness deepens understanding and weakens the hold of limiting mental concepts over your experience. When consciousness recognition seems ineffective, Goldsmith recommended examining your motivation for spiritual practice. Are you using spiritual techniques to improve your human experience, or genuinely seeking recognition of your true identity as divine consciousness itself? Spiritual materialism, using consciousness techniques to get better human circumstances, keeps you trapped in the very dualistic thinking that creates problems. True spiritual practice involves surrendering personal goals for the sake of consciousness recognition, regardless of external results. This doesn't mean becoming passive about practical responsibilities or ignoring legitimate human needs. It means approaching life's challenges from recognition of wholeness rather than reacting from concepts of personal inadequacy, limitation, or separation from supply and guidance. The shift from spiritual materialism to authentic recognition is subtle, but transformative. When you stop trying to use consciousness and instead recognize consciousness as your true identity, genuine spiritual living begins naturally, without effort or manipulation. Physical healing challenges often persist despite sincere consciousness recognition, because deep-rooted beliefs about heredity, aging, and physical vulnerability continue operating beneath conscious awareness, creating continued experience of limitation and disorder. Goldsmith discovered that emotional healing frequently requires addressing ancestral patterns and family conditioning that created fundamental beliefs about identity, worthiness, and life possibilities. These inherited mental concepts influence experience even when consciously rejected or spiritually understood. The solution isn't psychological analysis or emotional processing, but deeper recognition that consciousness has no family history, genetic inheritance, or emotional baggage from the past. Your true identity remains eternally fresh, complete, and uncontaminated by human generational patterns. This level of consciousness recognition requires tremendous spiritual courage because it means releasing identification with personal history, family identity, and psychological explanations for current limitations. Freedom comes through recognizing yourself as pure consciousness without historical conditioning. When relationship healing seems impossible despite consciousness recognition, the obstacle is usually attachment to others changing their behavior to meet your emotional needs and expectations. You're still operating from personal identity, seeking satisfaction from external sources. True relationship harmony emerges when you recognize others as consciousness rather than personalities who should behave according to your preferences. This requires releasing your agenda for how relationships should unfold and allowing consciousness to express its own perfect harmony. This practice is particularly challenging with family members and intimate partners where emotional patterns run deep. Recognition of consciousness doesn't eliminate appropriate boundaries or healthy relationship standards, but shifts your motivation from personal need to spiritual recognition. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to maintain consciousness recognition during intense life transitions, such as career changes, relationship endings, health crises, and financial upheavals, when spiritual understanding faces its greatest tests through challenging circumstances. During his own experience of professional transition from traditional ministry to mystical teaching, Goldsmith faced severe criticism from religious authorities and loss of financial security. Consciousness recognition sustained him through years of uncertainty about life direction. He discovered that major life transitions often represent consciousness, calling you to deeper levels of spiritual understanding. What appears as external disruption is actually consciousness dissolving limiting structures that no longer serve your spiritual evolution and authentic expression. Advanced practice involves welcoming transitions as consciousness expanding into greater freedom rather than problems to be solved or difficulties to endure. This perspective transforms crisis into opportunity for deeper recognition of your unlimited spiritual nature. In business and professional activities, consciousness recognition creates an entirely different approach to success, competition, and material achievement. Instead of struggling against others or forcing outcomes through personal will, you allow consciousness to express its own perfect activity. Goldsmith worked with numerous business leaders who discovered that consciousness recognition actually enhanced professional effectiveness rather than making them passive or impractical. Intuitive guidance improved decision-making, and authentic leadership emerged naturally from spiritual understanding. This doesn't mean avoiding practical skills or professional development, but approaching career activities from consciousness rather than personal ambition or fear of failure. Work becomes an expression of consciousness rather than a source of identity or security. Students often report that professional opportunities expand naturally when they stop trying to manipulate career outcomes and trust consciousness to express its perfect activity through their skills, talents, and service to others. Parenting from consciousness recognition transforms family relationships by recognizing children as complete spiritual beings rather than incomplete humans requiring improvement, correction, or constant guidance from adult authority figures who know better about life direction. This approach doesn't eliminate appropriate discipline or practical guidance. but shifts the foundation from control-based parenting to recognition-based relationship. You respond to children from their wholeness rather than reacting to behavioral problems or developmental concerns. Goldsmith emphasized that children are often naturally closer to consciousness recognition than adults because they haven't yet accumulated layers of mental conditioning about limitation, separation, and personal inadequacy that complicate spiritual understanding and authentic expression. Many parents discover that behavioral problems resolve naturally when they consistently recognize their children's true identity as divine consciousness, rather than trying to fix personality issues or force better behavior through reward and punishment systems. Aging and physical decline become opportunities for deeper consciousness recognition rather than inevitable deterioration to fear and resist. Goldsmith maintained vitality and mental clarity well into his 70s through consistent recognition of consciousness as timeless, ageless essence. The mental concepts that create aging experience include beliefs about physical decline, reduced capacity, approaching death, and loss of relevance as life progresses. These concepts exist in human thinking, not in consciousness, which remains eternally fresh and unlimited. This doesn't mean denying the practical realities of physical changes or avoiding appropriate health care, but recognizing that your essential identity remains unaffected by temporal changes in bodily appearance and physical capacity. Students often report increased energy and improved health when they stop identifying with aging concepts and consistently recognize consciousness as the ageless substance of their being. Physical improvements often follow naturally without forced effort to reverse aging process. Death loses its terror when understood as the dissolution of mental concepts, rather than the ending of consciousness. Goldsmith's final years demonstrated complete peace about transitional processes because he recognized consciousness as eternal, indestructible spiritual reality. This understanding transforms grief and loss by recognizing that consciousness cannot be destroyed or separated. What appears as death is simply the release of limiting concepts that temporarily obscured recognition of eternal spiritual identity. Fear of death creates much human suffering and drives desperate attempts to extend physical life or achieve immortality through material means. Recognition of consciousness as your true identity resolves death anxiety naturally without denial or spiritual bypassing. Many students report profound peace about mortality questions when they deeply recognize consciousness as their essential nature. This recognition doesn't eliminate natural sadness about loss, but removes the terror that often accompanies thoughts about physical death. Global challenges such as war, environmental destruction, and social injustice appear differently from consciousness recognition. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by world problems or politically divided about solutions, you recognize consciousness as the only true power operating. This doesn't create passive indifference to human suffering or social responsibility, but establishes spiritual foundation for effective action. When you respond to global challenges from consciousness rather than personal outrage or political ideology, your contribution becomes more unified and healing. Goldsmith taught that consciousness recognition by even small numbers of people creates invisible spiritual influence that contributes to planetary harmony and peace. Individual spiritual understanding has collective impact beyond immediate personal circles. Students often discover that their social and environmental concerns are addressed more effectively when approached from consciousness recognition rather than emotional reaction or political activism based on mental concepts about good and evil forces. Teaching and sharing consciousness recognition requires great spiritual maturity because you must resist the temptation to convert others or prove spiritual truth through argument, demonstration, or personal persuasion that creates spiritual pride and mental confusion. Goldsmith emphasized that consciousness recognition cannot be taught through intellectual explanation or emotional inspiration. It must be recognized individually through direct spiritual experience that transcends mental understanding and emotional conviction about truth. Your role is simply to live from consciousness recognition and allow others to recognize truth for themselves when they are spiritually ready. Forcing spiritual understanding on others actually interferes with their natural awakening process and creates resistance. The most effective spiritual teaching occurs through silent recognition of others' true identity as consciousness rather than verbal instruction or demonstration. This creates spiritual atmosphere where recognition can emerge naturally without personal interference or manipulation. Your entire understanding of God is now transformed from external deity to recognized consciousness, expressing as your very being. This recognition dissolves the separation that created every limitation, problem, and spiritual seeking in your experience throughout life. Prayer becomes communion with your own divine nature, rather than petitioning outside authority. Healing emerges through recognition of wholeness rather than treatment of problems. Abundance flows as consciousness expressing supply rather than acquisition of material possessions. This isn't the end of your spiritual journey, but the beginning of authentic spiritual living. Every day offers opportunities to deepen recognition and discover new dimensions of consciousness expressing through relationships, activities, and circumstances. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.
Have you ever found yourself standing at the crossroads of faith and doubt, wondering why the profound spiritual transformation promised in Scripture seems just beyond your reach? What if I told you that one of Jesus' most powerful declarations, "I am the resurrection," has been fundamentally misunderstood for centuries, and this misinterpretation might be the very thing blocking your spiritual breakthrough? For countless seekers on the spiritual path, these words have been relegated to a historical event or a future promise, something that happened once in Jerusalem, or something awaiting us beyond this life. But what if Jesus wasn't just making a statement about himself? What if he was revealing a universal principle that could revolutionize your experience of the divine right here, right now? Has this ever happened to you? You've devoted years to spiritual practice, prayer, meditation, study, only to find yourself feeling like you're pressing your face against a window, seeing but not quite experiencing the radiant reality on the other side. There's a profound reason for this disconnect, and it goes far deeper than your devotion or technique. The revolutionary truth is that when Jesus proclaimed, "I am the resurrection," he wasn't speaking of a distant miracle or theological concept. He was inviting us into an immediate recognition of our divine nature, a consciousness where separation from God is revealed as the ultimate illusion. This isn't about what happens after physical death. It's about awakening to your true spiritual identity in this very moment. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you understand spiritual practice and experience divine presence in your everyday life. The kingdom of heaven isn't a distant realm you strive to reach through endless spiritual effort. It's a state of consciousness waiting to be recognized through a profound shift in perception. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. The resurrection consciousness Jesus embodied isn't something you attain after years of spiritual practice. It's your true nature waiting to be acknowledged. For generations, sincere spiritual seekers have been caught in the trap of striving, struggling to achieve what is already present within them. They've practiced what they believed was faith, never realizing they were missing the revolutionary power behind Jesus' declaration. What you're about to discover might surprise you, that the greatest barrier to experiencing this resurrection consciousness isn't what you lack, but rather your inability to recognize what you already possess. The transformation doesn't happen through adding something new to your spiritual practice, but through removing the veils of misunderstanding that have kept you separated from your divine identity. Imagine for a moment what your life might look like if you could move through each day from a place of inner stillness and divine recognition that remains unshaken by external circumstances, where challenges become opportunities for deeper awakening rather than obstacles to be feared. This transformation isn't just a spiritual theory, it's a practical reality that thousands have experienced through understanding what Jesus truly meant. After decades of deep spiritual practice and guiding countless individuals through their own spiritual journeys, the mystic Joel Goldsmith uncovered a hidden truth that revolutionizes our understanding of resurrection. The profound revelation is this: resurrection isn't an event confined to history or reserved for the afterlife. It's a state of consciousness available to us right now. It's the awakening to our true identity as spiritual beings expressing the divine nature. This insight transforms everything we thought we understood about spiritual practice. The resurrection Jesus spoke of is actually the revelation of what has always been true: your oneness with divine presence. It's not something you need to achieve or attain through years of spiritual discipline. It's a present reality waiting for your recognition, like the sun that continues to shine whether or not clouds temporarily obscure it from view. The journey of spiritual awakening isn't about becoming something different or better. It's about unveiling what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioned thinking and limited identity. The transformation occurs not by adding something new to your consciousness, but by removing the veils that have obscured your true nature. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what actually prevents us from experiencing this resurrection consciousness. The startling truth is that the barrier isn't external. It's not your circumstances, your past, or even your spiritual practices. The real obstacle lies within your own consciousness. That constant inner narrative of seeking, striving, and struggling actually reinforces the very separation it's trying to overcome. Each time you approach spiritual practice from the mindset of, "I need to connect with God," or "I must overcome my human limitations," you're unconsciously cementing the illusion that you are separate from divine presence. This mental paradigm creates a self-reinforcing cycle that keeps resurrection consciousness just beyond your reach. The revolutionary decision that initiates true transformation isn't choosing a new spiritual technique, it's choosing a new perspective. It's recognizing that the kingdom of God isn't something to achieve, but something to allow. The divine reality isn't waiting for you to become worthy of it through spiritual effort. It's already the foundation of your being, waiting only for your acknowledgement. If you felt a resonance with these spiritual insights, hit that subscribe button to join our community of seekers exploring timeless wisdom together. Every subscriber becomes part of this journey of awakening. Behind the scenes of every authentic spiritual tradition, this essential truth has been preserved by those who discovered it through direct experience. They found that what appeared to be an arduous journey toward enlightenment was actually a progressive unveiling of what had always been present. If you're beginning to sense a resonance with this understanding of resurrection consciousness, write divine recognition in the comments below. If you're beginning to sense a resonance with this understanding of resurrection consciousness, you've already taken the first step on a profound journey of transformation. But let's explore what specifically blocks this awareness from becoming your lived experience. Consider for a moment the constant stream of mental activity flowing through your consciousness. Your mind races with worries about tomorrow's uncertainties, regrets about yesterday's mistakes, endless plans that may never materialize, and desires that feel insatiable. This mental chatter, this noise, acts like static on a radio, drowning out the clear signal of divine truth that has always been broadcasting within you. This revelation changes our entire approach to spiritual growth. What if the solution isn't trying harder, meditating longer, or accumulating more spiritual knowledge? What if it's simply creating enough inner stillness for divine reality to impress itself upon your awareness? Joel Goldsmith discovered that true resurrection occurs not through spiritual striving, but through mental quietude, a state where the human thinking mind surrenders its constant activity long enough for spiritual perception to emerge. The mindset shift this creates is revolutionary. Most spiritual seekers operate from the paradigm of achievement, believing that through enough prayer, meditation, good deeds, or spiritual practice, they'll eventually earn or attain a connection with the divine. But the hidden truth behind Jesus' declaration, "I am the resurrection," reveals a completely different paradigm. The resurrection consciousness isn't something you achieve through effort. It's something you allow through recognition. Think about the implications of this subtle but profound distinction. Rather than seeing spiritual growth as a journey towards something you don't yet possess, you begin to understand it as an unveiling of what has always been your true nature. The divine reality isn't a distant goal to reach. It's the very foundation of your being, momentarily obscured by mental noise and mistaken identity. When Jesus proclaimed, "I am the resurrection," he wasn't making a statement about his unique status separate from humanity. He was speaking from a realized consciousness of divine identity that is available to all of us. He was modeling the awareness that comes when the noise of human thinking subsides enough for divine consciousness to reveal itself as our true nature. This revelation transforms spiritual practice from a technique-based approach into a recognition-based reality. Instead of asking, "What must I do to connect with God?" you begin asking, "What veils my awareness of the divine presence that has never been absent?" The journey shifts from accumulation to release, from striving to allowing, from becoming to recognizing. The impact of this shift in perspective cannot be overstated. It changes not only how you approach spiritual practice, but how you experience every aspect of life. If something in this message has sparked recognition within you, share "Resurrection is recognition" in the comments. The impact of this shift in perspective cannot be overstated. It changes not only how you approach spiritual practice, but how you experience every aspect of life. When you recognize resurrection consciousness as your true nature, a profound transformation begins to unfold in your everyday experience. Imagine for a moment what your life might look like if you could move through each day from a place of inner stillness that remains unshaken by external circumstances. Picture yourself navigating challenges with a quiet certainty that transcends the reactive patterns of fear, anxiety, and struggle. This isn't fantasy or wishful thinking. It's the natural expression of resurrection consciousness in daily life. The resurrection Jesus embodied and spoke of reveals a way of being in which you access the infinite resources of divine mind that have always been present within you. These resources aren't abstract spiritual concepts, but practical expressions of wisdom, peace, creativity, and love that naturally flow through you when you recognize your true identity. The kingdom of God that religious traditions have projected into distant heavens or future times is actually a present reality within your own consciousness, waiting only for your recognition. This revelation transforms how we understand spiritual awakening. It's not about reaching a distant destination through arduous spiritual effort. It's about awakening to what has always been true. The journey is less like climbing a mountain to reach a summit, and more like clearing away clouds to reveal the sun that has always been shining. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining a principle Joel Goldsmith called the divine already, a revolutionary insight that completely reshapes our approach to spiritual growth. This principle affirms that divine presence, wisdom, and wholeness already exist in complete fullness, whether or not human consciousness recognizes it. Consider how this changes everything. The divine isn't speaking to you through noise and drama. but through the quiet certainty that emerges when your personal thinking subsides. Your spiritual journey isn't about making something happen through effort and technique. It's about allowing yourself to recognize what has always been true. What if the greatest barrier to your spiritual growth isn't what you lack, but your inability to recognize what you already possess? What if resurrection consciousness isn't something you attain through years of spiritual discipline, but something you allow to express through you by removing the veils of misperception? This insight releases the anxiety and strain that often accompanies spiritual practice, replacing it with a deep sense of rest in the divine already. Instead of striving to become something different, you begin to live from the recognition of what you truly are, an individualized expression of the same consciousness from which Jesus declared, "I am the resurrection." If you're experiencing an inner resonance with this understanding of your true nature, type "divine already" in the comments below. If you're experiencing an inner resonance with this understanding of your true nature, you're beginning to grasp what Jesus truly meant when he declared, "I am the resurrection." This isn't just a theological concept. It's a practical reality that transforms your entire experience of life. Think of your consciousness as a vast kingdom with infinite resources, wisdom, and possibility waiting to be explored. When Jesus taught, "The kingdom of God is within you," he was revealing the same profound truth as "I am the resurrection." These weren't separate teachings, but complementary revelations of the same spiritual reality, that divine wholeness isn't something distant or future, but an ever-present reality at the core of your being. This inner kingdom contains everything you could possibly need or desire, not as future potentials to be achieved through spiritual effort or material striving, but as present realities to be recognized through spiritual awareness. The resources of divine mind, wisdom, love, peace, abundance, creativity aren't abstract concepts but practical expressions of your true nature waiting to be accessed. The revelation that changes everything is realizing that this kingdom isn't something you build or create. It's something you discover through a shift in perception. The journey of spiritual awakening isn't about adding something new to your consciousness, but about removing the veils that have obscured what has always been present. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what prevents most people from experiencing this inner kingdom. Behind the scenes of human experience, a hidden pattern keeps many trapped in limitation despite their sincere spiritual seeking. Most people live with their attention fixated on problems, constantly analyzing what's wrong, what's missing, or what hurts in their lives. Have you noticed how your mind gravitates toward the negative even when much is going well? This tendency to focus on problems rather than wholeness isn't a personal failing or character flaw. It's a collective mindset that we've all inherited, a paradigm that keeps consciousness locked in material perception rather than resurrection awareness. This problem-focused mindset creates a self-reinforcing cycle. When your attention is constantly drawn to what's wrong or what's missing, your consciousness remains at the very frequency that perpetuates those conditions. It's like trying to clear muddy water by stirring it more vigorously. The solution requires a completely different approach. If you found value in these spiritual insights about resurrection consciousness, a simple like helps others discover this message too, extending these principles to those who might be searching for exactly this understanding. The transformation begins when you realize that where you place your attention determines what you experience. Not because you're creating reality through positive thinking, but because you're aligning your perception with different levels of an already existing reality. When your awareness rises above problem-focused thinking into resurrection consciousness, you access a level of mind where wholeness is already established. If you're beginning to recognize how your attention shapes your experience of reality, share "Shifting My Awareness" in the comments below. If you're beginning to recognize how your attention shapes your experience of reality, you've taken a crucial step toward resurrection consciousness. But there's a deeper obstacle that Joel Goldsmith identified after decades of working with spiritual seekers, what he called the separated self-illusion. This fundamental misconception is the belief that you exist as a separate entity apart from divine presence. It's the ingrained perception that you are here and God is there, with a gap between that must somehow be bridged through spiritual practice. This core illusion undermines almost all spiritual efforts because it keeps you approaching divine reality from the very mindset that creates the apparent separation. Consider how this plays out in everyday spiritual practice. Most people pray, meditate, or practice stillness as if they are separate beings trying to connect with something outside themselves. Each affirmation, visualization, or spiritual technique subtly reinforces the very separation it's trying to overcome. It's like trying to connect to Wi-Fi while believing your device has no receiver. When Jesus proclaimed, "I am the resurrection," he wasn't making a statement about his unique divinity separate from yours. He was speaking from a consciousness of oneness that recognized no separation between himself and divine being. The "I am" in his declaration wasn't his personal identity, but the universal divine identity expressing through his individualized consciousness. This revelation transforms how we approach spiritual practice entirely. Instead of struggling to bridge an imaginary gap between yourself and divine presence, you begin to recognize that the only separation exists in perception, not in reality. The journey isn't about becoming something different, but unveiling what you already are. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining a practical method Joel developed to transform this understanding from intellectual concept to lived experience. One of his most powerful techniques was a practice he called resting in the Word. In this approach, instead of mentally struggling with a problem or repeating affirmations about what you want to change, you select a spiritual truth that addresses the consciousness behind your situation and quietly abide in that truth. For resurrection consciousness, you might rest in statements like, "I and the Father are one," or "I am the resurrection and the life." The breakthrough insight here is that you're not using these statements as tools to fix something or achieve a result. You're allowing your consciousness to marinate in a truth that already exists until that truth becomes more substantial to you than the problem. This isn't mechanical repetition or positive thinking, but conscious dwelling in spiritual reality. The transformation occurs naturally as your awareness shifts from problem consciousness to truth consciousness. You're not trying to make something happen through spiritual effort. You're allowing yourself to recognize what has always been true behind the appearance of separation. If you're sensing a new approach to spiritual practice emerging within you through these insights, share "Resting in Oneness" in the comments below. If you're sensing a new approach to spiritual practice emerging within you through these insights, you're beginning to step into the transformative power of resurrection consciousness. There's another hidden truth that Joel discovered that takes this understanding even deeper. Most spiritual practice remains limited by an intense personal focus. My healing, my financial situation, my relationship, problems. We approach the divine with an endless list of personal concerns, treating spiritual practice as a means to solve individual problems. But this personal focus actually constrains what can be received because it keeps consciousness small and self-centered. One of Joel's most profound revelations was what he called impersonal spirituality. The recognition that resurrection consciousness expands your awareness beyond personal concerns to universal principles that are true for everyone. Everywhere, not just for you, When you rise into this universal awareness, you're no longer approaching the divine as a separate entity seeking personal benefits. You're recognizing universal truths that transcend individuality. This shift seems counterintuitive at first. How can focusing on universal principles rather than my specific needs possibly help me? The revelation is that when you rise into universal consciousness, your personal experience automatically begins to reflect the universal truth you've contacted. By expanding beyond the limited personal sense, you access the infinite resources of impersonal divine mind. Instead of praying for your healing, you recognize that wholeness is the nature of all being. Rather than asking for your supply, you acknowledge that infinite abundance is the very fabric of universal reality. This shift from personal to universal awareness represents one of the most significant transformations in spiritual development. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining another significant obstacle to experiencing resurrection consciousness: our attachment to mental pictures. This hidden barrier operates so subtly that most spiritual seekers remain unaware of its limiting influence. When we approach spiritual practice, our human mind immediately creates detailed images of how answers should look, when they should arrive, and what form they should take. Have you noticed how specific your expectations become when you're seeking a solution? This mental imaging happens almost automatically, often without our conscious awareness. These mental pictures actually become barriers that prevent us from receiving what divine intelligence is already providing. When we insist that our healing must come through a particular treatment, that our financial supply must appear through a specific channel, or that our relationship must unfold according to a predetermined script, we close ourselves to countless other possibilities. True, resurrection consciousness includes holding your preferences lightly, stating your need clearly, but remaining open to solutions beyond what you could imagine. This doesn't mean abandoning all desires or preferences. It means approaching them with an open hand rather than a clenched fist, creating space for divine intelligence to work in ways that might surprise and delight you. If you've noticed how your attachment to specific outcomes has limited your experience of divine goodness, share open to infinite possibilities in the comments below. If you've noticed how your attachment to specific outcomes has limited your experience of divine goodness, you're ready to explore what Joel Goldsmith considered the highest expression of spiritual awareness, what he called living by grace. This advanced dimension of resurrection consciousness naturally unfolds as you continue to recognize your oneness with divine presence. Living by grace represents a profound mindset shift from trying to make everything happen through your personal will and effort to recognizing that divine intelligence is already governing every situation perfectly. It's the difference between effortful striving and receptive allowing, between pushing against life's current and flowing with the river of divine intelligence that's already moving in the direction of your highest good. The remarkable discovery in this journey is that as resurrection consciousness becomes more established in your awareness, you find yourself making decisions and taking actions from an entirely different foundation. You still engage fully with life's responsibilities, making choices, fulfilling commitments, and navigating challenges. The fundamental difference is the consciousness behind these activities. Instead of approaching each day with anxiety about all you must accomplish, you move through life aware of divine presence, trusting that there is a spiritual intelligence working through and beyond your human efforts. When challenges arise, your first response isn't to launch into frantic problem-solving mode, but to pause briefly and recognize that divine mind is already present in this situation with solutions beyond your current understanding. This momentary recognition creates an opening for inspiration and guidance that transcends purely human reasoning. Solutions appear that wouldn't have occurred to your limited personal thinking. Resources emerge from unexpected sources. What seemed like obstacles reveal themselves as opportunities for greater awareness and expression. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining the profound transformation that occurs when you truly understand what Jesus meant by "I am the resurrection." The revelation of this teaching changes your entire experience of life at the most fundamental level. What was once a spiritual struggle becomes a flowing dance with divine presence. The journey that seemed arduous and distant reveals itself as a progressive awakening to what has always been true. Problems that appeared insurmountable at the human level dissolve naturally when approached from resurrection consciousness. This transformation isn't theoretical or abstract. It expresses itself in tangible ways through your health, relationships, creative expression, and every dimension of human experience. Not because you've manipulated circumstances to match your desires, but because your perception has shifted to recognize the divine reality that has always been present beneath appearances. The most remarkable aspect of this teaching is that resurrection consciousness isn't something you attain through spiritual effort, but something you allow to express as your natural state of being. This shift isn't about adding more spiritual practices to your already busy life. It's about recognizing the divine nature that has always been your true identity. If you're experiencing a sense of recognition as you hear these principles, type "I am resurrection consciousness" in the comments below. If you're experiencing a sense of recognition as you hear these principles, you're touching the edge of a profound truth that has the power to transform your entire experience of life. This teaching isn't just philosophical, it's intensely practical, touching every dimension of human experience with the light of divine reality. My hope is that something in this message has awakened a remembrance within you, a recognition of the resurrection consciousness that has always been your true identity. This isn't a new truth I'm sharing, but an ancient wisdom that your soul already knows. I'm simply calling you back to what has always been true. If you've resonated with this exploration of what Jesus truly meant by "I am the resurrection," I'd love for you to join our community of spiritual explorers. Subscribe to continue this journey together as we discover how timeless spiritual principles transform everyday living. Your subscription is more than a button click. It's stepping into a conversation about the deepest truths of our existence. When you find yourself experiencing moments of resurrection consciousness in your daily life, those times when you recognize your divine nature shining through the appearances, come back and let us know by commenting, "I am resurrection consciousness." Your insights become part of our collective awakening. If this message has sparked something meaningful within you, a simple like helps others discover it too, extending these principles to those who might be searching for exactly this understanding at exactly this moment. There's a video right here about the forgotten teaching of Jesus on the kingdom within that perfectly complements what we've explored today. Click and continue this journey of spiritual discovery with me there. Until we meet again, remember that the resurrection consciousness Jesus spoke of has always been your true identity, waiting only for your recognition. Have you ever felt that despite years of spiritual practice, something fundamental is still missing in your connection with the divine? That elusive sense that there's a deeper truth waiting to be discovered behind Jesus's most powerful declarations. Today, we're going to explore what happens within you when you truly grasp why Jesus proclaimed, "I am the light of the world," and why this understanding changes everything. This isn't just another theological discussion or biblical interpretation. What I'm about to share with you strikes at the very core of how you experience your spiritual identity and transforms your relationship with the divine from the inside out. When fully understood, this revelation has the power to dissolve the invisible barrier that may have been blocking your spiritual breakthrough for years. Has this ever happened to you? You sit down to pray, desperately seeking guidance or healing, only to feel like your words are dissipating into empty space. You follow all the right spiritual practices, yet still feel a persistent separation between yourself and the divine presence you're seeking to connect with. There's a profound reason for this disconnect, and it's hidden within Jesus' revolutionary declaration about light. When Jesus stated, "I am the light of the world," he wasn't speaking metaphorically or making some lofty religious claim meant to elevate himself above humanity. He was revealing a fundamental truth about the nature of consciousness itself, a truth that applies not just to him, but potentially to all of us. What if this statement wasn't about establishing his divinity in opposition to our humanity, but rather illuminating something about our shared spiritual essence that has been misunderstood for centuries? Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely reshape how you understand your place in the spiritual cosmos. The revelation behind Jesus' words transcends religious boundaries and speaks to the very heart of what it means to be spiritually awakened in any tradition. Most of us have been conditioned to approach our spiritual life from a position of fundamental separation, as if we're reaching across a vast chasm trying to connect with something entirely outside ourselves. We've been taught that divine light is something we need to seek, rather than something we might already be intimately connected to at our core. This misunderstanding creates a spiritual journey based on lack, striving, and perpetual seeking, when what Jesus may have been pointing to is something far more immediate and revolutionary. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. What would change in your life if you discovered that the light Jesus spoke of isn't something distant you need to acquire through spiritual effort, but rather a fundamental aspect of your being that's been obscured by layers of conditioning and false beliefs about separation? This understanding turns conventional spirituality on its head and reveals why so many sincere seekers find themselves stuck in patterns of spiritual frustration despite their best efforts. Have you ever found yourself staring at the night sky, surrounded by darkness, and wondered why you feel so disconnected from the divine light that supposedly illuminates our world? This question has haunted spiritual seekers for centuries, and it points directly to one of Jesus' most profound yet misunderstood declarations: "I am the light of the world." But what if I told you that understanding the true meaning behind these words could completely transform your spiritual experience in ways you never imagined possible? Most of us approach our spiritual lives from a place of separation and disconnection. We pray fervently, sometimes desperately, yet often feel like our words are merely echoing in an empty room. Has this ever happened to you? That moment when your deepest prayers seem to hit an invisible ceiling, bouncing back to you unanswered. There's a profound reason for this disconnect, and it lies hidden within Jesus' illuminating declaration. When Jesus proclaimed, "I am the light," he wasn't speaking metaphorically or making some lofty religious claim meant to elevate himself above humanity. He was revealing a fundamental truth about reality itself and about your true identity. This revelation is so transformative that once fully grasped, it changes everything about how you relate to the divine, how you pray, and how you move through life's challenges. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely reshape how you understand your place in the cosmos and your relationship with divine light. The truth is, we've been conditioned to see ourselves as separate from divine light, like travelers lost in darkness, desperately searching for a distant beacon. But Jesus was pointing to something far more revolutionary, a recognition so profound that it dissolves the very foundation of spiritual struggle. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. What makes Jesus' approach to spirituality so radical is that he never positioned himself as separate from divine light. Have you noticed that? When you study his words and actions closely, you see someone who spoke with unwavering confidence about his connection to divine source. This wasn't spiritual arrogance. It was the natural expression of someone who fully recognized an eternal truth about the nature of reality. The revolutionary insight Jesus was sharing is that divine light isn't something external we need to search for or earn through spiritual effort. This light isn't distant, separate, or unreachable. What if, all this time, we've been like waves desperately trying to find the ocean, when in reality, we've always been manifestations of that very ocean? What if the disconnect we feel in prayer comes not from divine absence, but from our misunderstanding of our true relationship with divine presence? As we dive deeper into Jesus' illuminating declaration, you'll discover why so many spiritual seekers remain trapped in darkness despite years of devoted practice. The truth that's about to unfold might challenge everything you've been taught about your relationship with the divine, but it also holds the key to a spiritual experience that feels natural, effortless, and profoundly transformative. Think about how we've been conditioned throughout our entire lives. From childhood, most spiritual teachings paint a picture of humanity as fundamentally separated from divine light. This mindset of separation has become so deeply ingrained in our consciousness that we hardly question it anymore. We've internalized the belief that we're spiritual orphans, abandoned in a dark world, desperately calling out to a distant source of light that may or may not respond to our pleas. This conditioning shapes how we approach every aspect of our spiritual journey. We've been taught to bow our heads in submission, to beg for divine intervention, to plead for grace, as if it's something that must be earned or granted by an external authority. Behind the scenes of every religious tradition lies this fundamental assumption that we are here and divine light is somewhere else, beyond a vast, unbridgeable gap. The profound revelation that can transform your entire spiritual experience is recognizing how radically different Jesus' approach was from this mindset of separation. When you truly examine his words and actions with fresh eyes, you witness something revolutionary. Jesus never approached the divine from a place of separation or lack. He never begged, he never pleaded, he never bargained. Instead, he spoke with an unwavering confidence that mystified the religious authorities of his time. "I and the Father are one," he declared. "I am the light of the world." These weren't the words of someone trying to reach across a vast cosmic divide. These were the declarations of someone who fully recognized his oneness with divine source. The hidden truth that religious institutions rarely emphasize is that this wasn't spiritual arrogance or some special dispensation granted only to Jesus. His radical confidence stemmed from his recognition of an eternal truth that has existed since before time began, a truth about the nature of reality itself and about your true identity within that reality. Jesus understood that the mindset of separation is an illusion, perhaps the most powerful illusion ever created. The decisions we make from this illusion create entirely different results than those made from the consciousness of oneness that Jesus embodied. When we operate from separation, we experience life as a constant struggle against forces that seem to oppose us. But when we recognize our oneness with divine light, we experience life as a natural unfolding of that same light expressing through us. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what actually changes inside you when you begin to grasp what Jesus meant when he declared, "I am the light." The transformation isn't just philosophical or theological, it's practical, tangible, and profoundly impactful in your everyday experience. The journey from separation consciousness to recognition of your oneness with divine light doesn't happen intellectually. It's not about adopting a new belief system or memorizing spiritual concepts. It's an experiential awakening to a reality that has always been present but obscured by conditioned patterns of thinking. If these insights about Jesus's "I am the light" teaching have resonated with your spirit today, hit that subscribe button to join our community of seekers exploring these profound spiritual truths together. If you've ever experienced even a brief moment when you felt completely at one with life, completely at peace, completely illuminated from within, write in the comments, "I've glimpsed the light within," because that momentary experience offers a precious clue to the truth Jesus was revealing about your essential nature. What Jesus understood at the deepest level, and what he was desperately trying to help us understand, is that divine light isn't some external force that we need to reach through years of spiritual effort or perfect religious practice. The revolutionary revelation he was pointing to is that this light is your original nature, your fundamental identity beneath all the accumulated layers of conditioning and false beliefs about separation. It's who you were before the world told you who you should be. Think of it like this. Just as a diamond buried in mud remains a diamond regardless of its covering, your essence as divine light remains unchanged beneath the accumulated dust of separation consciousness. The spiritual journey isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about uncovering what you've always been. This understanding creates a paradigm shift in how you approach every aspect of your life. When you truly begin to grasp what Jesus meant by declaring, "I am the light," a profound transformation occurs. Your prayers shift from desperate pleas to powerful recognition. Your spiritual practice evolves from striving to allowing. Your entire experience changes from struggle into natural, effortless unfolding. Behind the scenes of this inner transformation is a complete recalibration of your relationship with existence itself. The breakthrough understanding is that you are not a cosmic orphan, abandoned in darkness and desperately seeking connection with some distant light. You are the very expression of that light itself, living and breathing through divine inheritance right now in this very moment. This isn't some lofty spiritual theory or philosophical concept. It's the fundamental reality behind your existence, the actual ground of your being. This mindset shift completely revolutionizes how you navigate life's inevitable challenges. Instead of facing difficulties from a place of separation, lack, and limitation, you approach them from the recognition of the divine resources that are already present within your being. The impact of this understanding goes far beyond theory. It creates a tangible shift in how you experience your daily reality. Consider how differently you might approach a challenging situation from these two mindsets. From separation consciousness, you might feel overwhelmed, alone, and resourceless. From the recognition of your oneness with divine light, you approach the same situation with an inner knowing that transcendent wisdom, love, and power are already present within you as your true nature. The journey toward embodying this understanding doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual awakening, a progressive recognition that unfolds as you begin to question the assumptions of separation that have shaped your spiritual experience. Each moment of recognition creates a ripple effect, gradually dissolving the illusion of separation and revealing more of your true nature as divine light expressing in human form. Let me share a powerful metaphor that illuminates this truth in a way that's impossible to forget. Imagine a wave in the vast ocean suddenly developing consciousness and identity. If that wave believed itself to be separate from the ocean, it might spend its entire existence in fear and anxiety, desperately trying to connect with the ocean. Yet the truth is, the wave has never for a single moment been anything other than the ocean itself in wave form. If you've ever had a moment when this ocean metaphor resonated with something deep inside you, type "I am the ocean" in the comments below. This transformational understanding becomes even clearer when we examine another profound statement Jesus made that perfectly aligns with "I am the light." When he proclaimed, "I and my Father are one." Many religious institutions have interpreted this as an exclusive claim, something that set Jesus apart as uniquely divine while the rest of humanity remains in separation. But this interpretation misses the entire revelation Jesus was offering. The radical truth is that Jesus wasn't making a special claim unique to himself alone. This was never meant to be an exclusive revelation that applied only to Jesus as a singular spiritual figure. Rather, he was unveiling the universal truth about every human being's relationship with divine source. The revolutionary impact of this understanding is that this oneness is not something you need to achieve through decades of spiritual practice, meditation, or religious devotion. It's not a distant goal to be reached after years of effort. This oneness is the very foundation of your existence, already complete, already whole, already perfect. When Jesus declared, "I am the light," he was inviting us to recognize what he had recognized, that divine light isn't something separate from us that we need to connect with, but rather our very essence and true identity. Behind the scenes of our daily human experience lies this profound reality that most spiritual seekers miss entirely. We've been conditioned to view spirituality as a path towards something, a journey of becoming, when in fact it's a process of unveiling what already is. Let's explore this truth more deeply through the ocean and wave metaphor we touched on earlier. Imagine the vast ocean with its countless waves rising and falling on its surface. A wave is not separate from the ocean, desperately trying to become oceanic in nature. It doesn't need to strive or struggle to connect with the ocean. The wave already is ocean, temporarily expressing in wave form. Its entire existence, its substance, its power, all of it comes from the ocean itself. The wave's very being is oceanic in nature. In the same way, you are not a human being trying to reach divine light. You are that light temporarily expressing in human form. Your entire being, your consciousness, your life force, your creativity, all of it stems from the divine source expressing itself through your unique human form. This ocean metaphor isn't merely a beautiful analogy or poetic device. It's a profound revelation about the nature of reality itself and your place within it. When you truly grasp this understanding, it dissolves the root cause of all human suffering, which is the belief in separation. The primary source of our pain, our anxiety, our sense of lack and limitation all stem from this single misperception that we are somehow separate from our divine source. The journey of spiritual awakening is the progressive recognition that this separation has never actually existed except in our perception. The decisions we make from this place of oneness create entirely different results than those made from a consciousness of separation. When you recognize yourself as divine light expressing in human form, you naturally align with the flow of life rather than struggling against it. If this ocean metaphor has given you a new perspective on your relationship with the divine, type "I am not the wave, I am the ocean" in the comments. The greatest mystical teachers throughout history have revealed something profoundly transformative about this understanding of our divine nature as light. They discovered that when you truly grasp your oneness with divine light, you dissolve the fundamental root cause of all human suffering, the belief in separation. This isn't just philosophical theory, it's a practical revelation with immediate impact on your daily experience. Think about this insight for a moment. The primary source of our pain, our anxiety, our sense of lack and limitation, all of these stem from this single misperception that we are somehow separate from our divine source. When you believe yourself to be cut off from divine light, you naturally experience fear, inadequacy, and a persistent feeling that something essential is missing from your life. This mindset creates an underlying current of suffering that colors every experience. But the revolutionary journey begins when you start questioning this assumption of separation. What if this perceived gap between you and divine light has never actually existed? What if, as Jesus proclaimed, you are that very light expressing in human form? The profound revelation is that suffering doesn't need to be healed or fixed. It simply dissolves when the illusion that created it is recognized for what it is. Now, let me show you how this understanding completely transforms something as fundamental as prayer. Consider the stark contrast between two approaches to connecting with the divine. A person who perceives divine light as distant and separate naturally prays from that mindset. Please God, help me with this problem. Please fix this situation. Please give me strength. Their entire approach stems from a consciousness of separation, lack, and dependency on an external power that may or may not respond. But someone who has awakened to the truth that Jesus revealed when he said, "I am the light," experiences prayer in an entirely different way. Their prayer isn't about begging an external deity for intervention or trying to convince divine power to take action in their life. It's about recognizing and acknowledging what's already present. The essence of their prayer becomes, "Divine light is here now, expressing as my true nature. I acknowledge this presence that has never been absent." Subscribe now to continue this journey of spiritual awakening as we explore what it truly means to live from the understanding that you are divine light expressing in human form. This shift in consciousness creates a radical transformation in your spiritual practice. Prayer evolves from a desperate plea to a powerful recognition. It becomes less about asking and more about acknowledging what already is. This mindset shift doesn't just change your words, it alters the entire energy and effectiveness of your spiritual connection. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a complete recalibration of how you relate to the divine. Instead of viewing yourself as a separate entity desperately trying to connect with God, you recognize yourself as an individualized expression of that same divine light. The boundary between you and the divine begins to dissolve, and you experience a wholeness that has actually been present all along. If you've ever experienced a moment when prayer felt less like asking and more like simply resting in an awareness of divine presence already with you, type "prayer is recognition" in the comments below. The hidden truth behind Jesus' healing ministry reveals this principle in action in a profound way. When we examine how Jesus approached healing, we discover something remarkable that most traditional religious teachings overlook. He never once begged God to intervene from some distant heaven. He never pleaded for divine assistance as though it was separate from him. Instead, he simply acknowledged and recognized the divine light already present right there in the situation. Jesus demonstrated a fundamental spiritual principle where divine light is acknowledged without obstruction. Wholeness must naturally express. This wasn't miraculous in the supernatural way we typically think about miracles. It was the natural manifestation of spiritual law working through someone who fully understood his divine identity. Behind the scenes of every healing Jesus performed was this recognition of divine presence, not as something to be called down from heaven, but as the very substance and reality of the person standing before him. He saw beyond the appearance of disease or limitation to the divine reality that was always present, but obscured by human belief in separation. When Jesus declared, "I am the light," he wasn't making a special claim about himself alone. He was demonstrating what becomes possible when anyone recognizes their true nature as divine light, expressing in human form. This revelation completely transforms how we approach healing, both for ourselves and others. The profound impact of this understanding becomes even clearer when we consider how it changes our relationship with divine resources. For your entire life, you've likely been taught to seek God's help as if you were fundamentally separated from divine light. This seeking mindset creates an endless spiritual quest, always reaching for something that seems just beyond your grasp. You're constantly searching, striving, and struggling to connect with a divine presence that feels distant and elusive. But here's the breakthrough revelation that changes everything about your spiritual journey. Divine light isn't something you need to hunt down, earn, or convince to come your way. It's your inheritance through the simple fact of relationship. Just as a child naturally inherits traits and resources from their parents without having to beg for them, you naturally have access to divine qualities through your essential connection to the source. When this understanding truly takes root in your consciousness, your entire spiritual life undergoes a remarkable transformation. It evolves from begging into recognition, from anxious effort into restful knowing, from desperate pleading into peaceful receiving. The entire energy of your spiritual practice shifts from striving to allowing, from seeking to finding what was always present. This mindset transformation doesn't happen intellectually, it happens experientially. It's not about adopting a new belief system, but about awakening to a deeper reality that was always true before you recognized it. The journey isn't about becoming something you're not, but unveiling what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning that have created the illusion of separation. If you've ever experienced a moment when something you were desperately seeking suddenly appeared once you stopped the frantic search and simply relaxed into being, type, "What I seek is seeking me" in the comments below. Let me share a powerful practice that can help anchor this recognition of your divine light nature into your daily experience. This isn't complicated or esoteric. It's remarkably simple, yet profoundly transformative. Begin by sitting quietly each morning for just 10-15 minutes. Before your day unfolds, find a comfortable position, close your eyes, and simply be present with yourself. This isn't complicated meditation requiring special techniques or years of practice. It's simply quiet recognition of what already is. The revolutionary aspect of this practice is that you don't ask God for anything during this time. You don't plead, you don't petition, you don't bargain. Instead, you simply acknowledge the truth. I am divine light expressing right now. My breath, my consciousness, my very being in this moment is divine light shining. Feel the reality of this statement beyond the words themselves. Experience it as the fundamental truth of your existence. As thoughts of problems, concerns, or limitations naturally arise, and they will, don't fight them or try to suppress them. Resistance only gives them more power. Instead, gently return to recognition. Divine presence is my true nature. Whatever appears as challenge or lack in my human experience, the divine reality of wholeness and abundance is present now as the truth of my being. This practice isn't about creating something new, it's about recognizing what already is. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation by exploring what it means to live from cause rather than effect. Most of us have been conditioned to live from effect, constantly reacting to the appearances, circumstances, and conditions of our outer world. But the transformational journey begins when we learn to live from cause, from the recognition that our nature as divine light is the invisible reality behind all visible forms and circumstances in our lives. In essence, this means training yourself to recognize that your nature as divine light is the invisible reality behind all visible forms and circumstances in your life. When you look at your bank account, practice seeing beyond the numbers which are just effects to the infinite light that is your true source, which is cause. When facing a health challenge, see beyond the physical appearance to the divine light that animates every cell of your body. This isn't denial of human reality or magical thinking. It's recognition of a deeper dimension that is equally real, but usually overlooked in our materialistic world. This perspective revolutionizes how you respond to circumstances. Instead of constantly reacting to effects, the visible conditions and circumstances that appear in your life, you learn to live from consciousness of cause, the divine reality that precedes and produces those outer conditions. This journey shifts you from being a victim of circumstances to being consciously aligned with the creative principle that shapes reality itself. If you've practiced living from cause rather than effect and experienced how it shifts your relationship with challenging circumstances, write, "I choose to live from cause," in the comments below. Living from the recognition of your divine nature creates a profound shift in your entire spiritual experience. As we begin to embody this understanding that Jesus revealed when he said, "I am the light," something remarkable happens in the landscape of our inner journey. The spiritual path that once felt like an exhausting uphill battle, filled with striving, effort, and constant seeking, transforms into a natural unfolding of your divine nature. Think about how different this approach is from conventional spirituality. Most spiritual traditions position enlightenment or divine connection as something difficult to attain, requiring years of discipline, sacrifice, and struggle. But the revelation that Jesus offered turns this paradigm completely upside down. When you recognize that divine light is your original nature, not something distant you need to reach, the entire journey shifts from efforting into allowing. You begin to experience life not as a separate human entity struggling to connect with divinity, but as divine light, temporarily having a human experience. This subtle but profound shift in perception changes everything about how you move through the world. Your decisions flow from a completely different source, not from the desperate need to get something you lack, but from the overflow of what you already possess in your divine nature. The breakthrough moment comes when you realize that divine qualities aren't something you need to acquire through spiritual practice or religious devotion. Peace isn't something distant that you must struggle to attain. It's your inheritance, your natural state as divine expression. Wisdom isn't something you fundamentally lack that must be painfully accumulated. It's your birthright, flowing naturally from your divine nature. The same applies to every divine quality: abundance, joy, love, creativity, and strength. This perspective creates a complete mindset revolution in your spiritual journey. When this realization becomes your living consciousness rather than just an intellectual concept, you stop operating from fear-based decisions and begin living from divine assurance. Your actions flow from a completely different source, not from separation consciousness, but from the recognition of your oneness with divine light. The transformation doesn't make life perfect or problem-free, but it fundamentally changes how you experience those challenges. You approach them from a completely different level of consciousness, from recognition of wholeness rather than from a sense of separation and lack. And this makes all the difference in your daily experience of reality. I share these teachings about the true meaning of I am the light because I've witnessed their transformative power both in my own life and in the lives of countless others who have embraced this understanding. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's practical spirituality that radically shifts how we experience our relationship with the divine and with life itself. The journey of awakening to your true nature as divine light is both universal and deeply personal. Each person's path of recognition unfolds in its own unique way, yet the fundamental revelation remains the same. You are not separate from divine light, desperately seeking connection. You are that very light expressing in human form here and now. If you've experienced even a glimpse of what it means to live from the recognition of your divine nature rather than from separation consciousness, type, "The light I've been seeking is what I am," in the comments below. As we draw this exploration to a close, I'm struck by how profound yet simple this revelation truly is. What Jesus meant when he said, "I am the light," isn't some complex theological doctrine. It's a direct pointer to the truth of who you really are beneath all the layers of conditioning. This understanding doesn't require years of study or spiritual practice. It simply asks us to recognize what has always been true. I share these insights because I've witnessed how transformative they can be when fully embraced. The moment you begin to recognize yourself as divine light expressing in human form, rather than a human desperately seeking divine connection, everything shifts. Your prayers become more powerful, your challenges become opportunities for growth, and the spiritual journey transforms from struggle into natural unfolding. If you've resonated with this message today, if something within you recognized its truth beyond the intellectual understanding of the words themselves, I'd love for you to join our community of spiritual explorers. Subscribe to continue this journey of awakening as we explore these profound truths together. Each week, we delve into these life-changing revelations that liberate us from limitation and unveil our divine nature. If this message found its way to your heart today, simply comment, "The light has always been within me," so I know this resonated with you. And if you found value in these insights, that gentle tap on the like button helps others discover these transformative teachings who might be seeking exactly this understanding right now. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper, exploring how to apply this divine recognition in healing work. Click and continue with me there as we uncover more of what it means to live from the consciousness that I am the light.